In the middle of a brutal snowstorm, when most cars simply freeze in place and the road turns into a treacherous trail of ice, there's a certain kind of machine that keeps moving. Not gently, but with raw, loud, stubborn power. As if it were saying, no matter how hard winter tries to stop me, I was built to overcome it. For those who grew up seeing these trucks on the big screen, up in the mountains, or on the toughest winter jobs, they're not just vehicles. They're true frozen off-road relics, built in an era where the motto was simple: make machines that were built to last forever. Thick steel, engines that roar like wild beasts, and suspensions that look like they could survive the end of the world. Some were made for war, others for frozen ranches deep in the Alaskan interior. But they all have one thing in common. They were made to survive where everything else fails. And that brings up the question: have you ever wondered which old-school off-road trucks defied time, ice, and logic, and are still considered legends to this day? Because what you're about to see is a journey through the toughest, most iconic, most battle-hardened machines that ever faced the snow with style and brute force. Ready to discover the trucks that didn't just beat winter, but became part of it? Stick with me, because the last one on this list will surprise you, and maybe even move you. Ford F-150 Cumins. Now picture this: the classic Ford F-150, powered by the brute force of a real Cumins engine. Even though this combo was never officially offered by the factory, it became one of the most legendary builds among hardcore off-road fans. The trend picked up between the late 1970s and early 1980s, when F-150 owners began installing Cumins engines themselves, creating trucks that looked like they came straight from a secret Arctic survival lab. The most commonly used engine was the legendary 5.9-liter inline-six, the same one made famous in the Dodge Ram. It produced around 160 horsepower, but what really stood out was its insane torque. That gave this F-150 an incredible ability to tow heavy loads, cut through thick ice, and climb frozen slopes with ease. The suspension was reinforced with rear leaf springs and a solid front axle, combining durability with full four-wheel drive capability. The manual transmission gave drivers total control over deep snow trails, slippery climbs, and unpredictable terrain. Visually, these Cumins-swapped F-150s looked downright intimidating. A bulky hood, heavy-duty grille, and that deep diesel growl slicing through the winter silence like the roar of a wild animal. These conversions became especially popular in the freezing regions of the northern United States and Canada. Many of them were used as support vehicles on frozen farms, in remote industrial areas, and even in patrol missions through isolated snow-covered regions. And here's a cool detail. In the 1980s, a shop in Alaska specialized in this kind of conversion and had a waiting list of over 6 months. One of the trucks built there was used by a mountain rescue team in areas so extreme, even snowmobiles couldn't get through safely. Sound like a wild combo? Just wait until you see the next one, where tradition, raw power, and a body built to fight winter come together perfectly. GMC Sierra. The GMC Sierra from the 1980s is the kind of truck that feels like it was born to survive the impossible. Released in the early years of the decade, it positioned itself as a more refined alternative to Chevrolet trucks, but with the same rugged foundation and a bold look that quickly made it a favorite in the off-road world. Under the hood, the Sierra came with 5.7-liter V8 engines, producing around 180 horsepower. That was more than enough to handle snow-covered roads, especially when paired with four-wheel drive and a reinforced suspension designed to withstand weight, shocks, and rough frozen terrain. The body was solid, with straight lines, wide fenders, and a design that blended work with presence. The cabin was slightly more comfortable than other trucks of the time, but make no mistake, this machine was made to face cold weather without hesitation. In snowy conditions, the Sierra stood out for its balance and torque. It was common to see this model being used in frozen rural areas, hauling firewood, tools, supplies, and even towing custom sleds. In 1980s ski resorts, the Sierra became almost synonymous with reliability. Here's an interesting detail. Many GMC Sierras were turned into patrol trucks for small Canadian towns, where blizzards could isolate entire communities for days. One of these trucks became so well known in the Yukon that locals nicknamed it the Ice Beast, because it never failed a single rescue mission. Impressed? Then hang on, because the next model carries the wild DNA of off-road adventure from birth. Ford Bronco. Few names carry as much weight in off-road history as the Ford Bronco, and in the 1980s, this icon had already reached its third generation, tougher, wider, and with a more aggressive stance, especially for those tackling trails covered in snow and frozen mud. Originally launched in the 1960s, the Bronco went through major evolution before reaching its 1980s versions. By then, it came with 5.0-liter V8 engines, delivering around 150 horsepower. It wasn't the strongest in its class, but the Bronco made up for it with a sturdy setup built for action. The front had independent suspension, while the rear used a solid axle, ensuring stability and traction even on slippery terrain. The four-wheel drive version included manual locking differentials, letting drivers grip through deep snow or icy trails with confidence. And if you've ever seen a Bronco from the 1980s up close, you know what I mean. High body, straight windows, wide wheels, and that "don't mess with me" look. The engine roaring up a frozen trail sounds like the soundtrack of survival. Through many harsh winters, especially in the Rockies and places like Colorado and Alaska, the Bronco became the go-to partner for people who needed to go where no other vehicle could. Some were even used by farmers as improvised tractors during snowstorms, pulling supplies, fuel, and tools between remote properties. And here's something wild. In the 1980s, a group of explorers used 3 modified Broncos to cross a frozen stretch of northern Greenland. One of them still exists today, fully restored and on display in a museum dedicated to polar expedition vehicles. Think the Bronco was tough? Then get ready. The next one is a true American brute, built for extreme snow. Chevrolet K5 Blazer. Launched at the end of the 1960s but gaining massive popularity throughout the 1970s and 1980s, the Chevrolet K5 Blazer remains to this day one of the most respected names in the off-road world. By the time the mid-1980s versions were rolling off the line, it was already a true snow trail beast. Equipped with a 5.7-liter V8 engine, the Blazer delivered around 175 horsepower. That power was delivered through a four-wheel drive system with manual locking hubs and a heavy-duty transmission, making it one of the most reliable models for tackling deep snow and sub-zero temperatures. Its suspension featured rear leaf springs and an independent front setup, striking the right balance between toughness and a bit of comfort. And thanks to its shorter wheelbase compared to full-size pickups, it became a true snow tractor in the right hands. Visually, the K5 was bold and muscular. Straight bumpers, big wheels, a solid stance, and of course, the classic removable top on earlier versions, which made it even more iconic. On snowy ground, the Blazer moved like it was in its natural habitat. It wasn't rare to see one towing stranded vehicles or carrying rescue teams through impassable trails. In the 1980s, it was common to find K5 Blazers operating on military bases in frozen parts of the United States, as well as in ski resorts and forest stations across Canada. And here's the most impressive part. One K5 Blazer that operated in remote parts of Alaska racked up over 500,000 kilometers on its original engine before being retired. And even then, it was sold to a collector. Enjoying this ride through the world of old-school snow-dominating trucks? Then go ahead and hit the like button to support the channel. And if you're as into winter engineering as we are, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because there's still plenty of insane machines coming up next. Chevrolet K10. If there's one truck that symbolizes hard work in frozen environments, it's the Chevrolet K10. Built throughout the 1970s and into the mid-1980s, the K10 was one of the flagship models of General Motors' CK series. It delivered the perfect balance of strength, design, and performance on icy trails. The K10 usually came with 5.7-liter V8 engines, producing between 150 and 170 horsepower. Its four-wheel drive system was operated by a manual shifter, paired with either a manual or automatic transmission, both tough enough to handle packed snow, thick ice, and the challenge of pulling heavy loads in extreme cold. With a solid front axle and rear leaf spring suspension, the K10 had a simple yet incredibly durable setup. The kind of suspension that could take on potholes, snow, frozen rocks, mud, and whatever else winter could throw at it. Its high chassis gave it a dominant stance, with perfect approach angles for taking on snowbanks. Visually, the 1970s and 80s K10 had that unmistakable boxy look, with dual headlights, wide tires, and muscular fenders. It was common to see these trucks with oversized tires and snow chains, blazing paths through frozen forests, pulling sleds, or even towing smaller tractors out of deep snow. Over many North American winters, the K10 became a true Swiss Army knife on wheels. It was used on farms, in logging areas, ski resorts, hunting expeditions, and even in logistical support for maintaining secondary roads. And check this out. A 1980 K10 became famous in Montana for delivering supplies year after year to a remote mountain village that was only accessible via a narrow icy trail during the winter. The owner of the truck, a man in his 70s who never once missed the route. Tough, reliable, and no nonsense. But what comes next takes it all to another level, a truck that was born with a reputation for brute strength. Ford F-250 Highboy. When it comes to raw power, aggressive looks, and real presence in snowy terrain, it's impossible not to mention the legendary Ford F-250 Highboy. Built until the late 1970s, this specific version of the F-250 became famous for its factory-lifted suspension, which earned it the nickname Highboy among Ford fans. And that nickname stuck. Under the hood, the Highboy often carried V8 engines with 6.6 or even 7.5 liters of displacement, producing anywhere from 160 to 200 horsepower, depending on the year and setup. The power was absurd, the torque felt endless, and the fuel consumption? Let's just say that wasn't the point. This truck was built to conquer harsh terrain, not save gas. Its biggest advantage was its height. The straight front axle and direct transfer to four-wheel drive gave the Highboy a taller stance than usual. That made it almost unbeatable in deep snow. With the right tires, it turned into a kind of civilian tank. The steel frame, heavy-duty manual transmission, and long leaf spring suspension helped it stay stable even on rugged, icy terrain. In real life, the Highboy was used to blaze trails, tow frozen farm equipment, and even pull other stuck vehicles out of snowbanks. Its look demanded respect. Round headlights, heavy metal grille, square cab, and that deep V8 rumble tearing through the silence of the mountain. In some places, just hearing a Highboy coming meant that rescue or backup had arrived. And here's a true story. In the 1970s, a team of biologists used a Highboy to carry gear across a frozen trail in northern Wyoming. That very truck was donated to a local museum after 35 years of use, still running on the original engine. If that's not durability, I don't know what is. But the next truck? It's a legend among legends, built to face the cold with a rare mix of grit and guts. Dodge D100. The Dodge D100 might not be as widely known as its Ford or Chevy counterparts, but among classic truck enthusiasts, it's a name that stands for toughness and versatility. Built from the 1960s through the early 1980s, the D100 went through several versions. But it was during the 1970s and early 80s that it really carved out its legacy with people who needed a truck that could take on real winter. These trucks were typically equipped with 5.2-liter V8 engines, delivering somewhere between 140 and 160 horsepower. Rear-wheel drive came standard, but many units were later converted to four-wheel drive using aftermarket kits, specifically to deal with snow and ice conditions. With its leaf spring suspension and relatively lightweight chassis, the D100 had surprisingly good handling, especially on frozen terrain where excessive weight could work against you. Even though it was a bit lighter than its rivals, it could still carry heavy loads, tow sleds, climb snowy hills, and still have room to spare. Its design was simple and functional, straight lines, no gimmicks, and nothing unnecessary. And that simplicity was the secret. Less stuff to break, less stuff to freeze, just a truck that did the job. Many farmers and rural residents relied on the D100 to keep going through winter storms. There's even a well-known story about a D100 that served on a farm in rural Minnesota for over 30 winters, pushing through snow, slush, and brutal winds without ever letting its owner down. Enjoying this lineup of classic machines that treated the snow like it was nothing? Then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. And stay right here, because we've got 2 legendary trucks still to come, and the last one, it's nothing short of unbelievable. Dodge Fargo. Not many people today know the name Fargo, but anyone who lived through the 1960s and 70s in the cold regions of Canada knows exactly what it means. The Dodge Fargo FW100 was a truck built specifically for markets outside the United States, especially the Canadian environment, where extreme cold wasn't the exception, it was the rule. It shared the same platform as the classic Dodge D100, but came with a few unique design and build details, giving it an extra edge in rugged environments. The FW100 could be equipped with inline-6 or V8 engines, with the standout being the 5.2-liter V8 that delivered around 150 horsepower. Combined with its simple and rugged construction, it was the ideal machine for harsh, isolated conditions. The suspension used leaf springs both front and rear. It didn't offer much comfort, but it gave the truck serious durability. Its solid axle and available 4-wheel drive conversions made the Fargo a true civilian tank. In the snowy trails of the Yukon or frozen woodlands of Saskatchewan, it wasn't unusual to see an FW100 pushing through paths even military vehicles avoided. Visually, it had a more rounded shape compared to the D100. A unique grille, pronounced headlights, and a look that could almost be described as retro-futuristic. The cabin was basic and functional, with nothing fancy, which meant fewer problems when electronics froze or shorted out in sub-zero conditions. And here's a fascinating fact. In several indigenous communities in northern Canada, the Fargo FW100 became the main vehicle during snowbound months. With the roads completely covered, people relied on this truck to keep moving. One unit became famous for serving as an improvised ambulance for over a decade, hauling injured passengers on sleds hitched to the back. The Fargo FW100 is one of those forgotten gems, built to handle cold, distance, weight, and time. But what comes next is even rarer, and carries with it the spirit of a true frozen legend. International C1300. And now we've reached the top of the list with a true relic. The International C1300 wasn't just a pickup truck. It was practically a tractor in disguise, built by International Harvester, a brand that lived and breathed heavy-duty work. In the 1960s and early 70s, the C1300 earned a reputation as one of the most reliable vehicles ever made for rural use in extreme regions, including mountainous and frozen areas where winter lasts more than half the year. It came equipped with 4.8 or 5.6-liter V8 engines, delivering around 140 horsepower. But the numbers didn't matter as much as the feeling behind the wheel. The power came in steady and strong, with more than enough torque to drag logs, pull stuck vehicles, or climb snow-covered hills without breaking a sweat. The suspension was extremely tough, with heavy-duty leaf springs and a body-on-axle chassis that gave the truck a high, sturdy posture. Rear-wheel drive was standard, but many were later upgraded to 4-wheel drive, especially on farms or industrial sites where snow was a daily obstacle. The look of the International C1300 is pure vintage charm. Square lines, flat hood, simple headlights, and a strong steel grille. But what really stood out was its presence. When this truck showed up, you knew someone serious had arrived. Inside, the cabin was Spartan, with nothing more than the essentials. But that simplicity was a strength. With less electronics and fewer moving parts, the C1300 was practically immune to cold weather breakdowns. Everything worked, even when the thermometer dropped way below zero. And here's the best part. One unit of the International C1300 worked on a farm in the Colorado mountains for 40 consecutive years without ever having its engine opened. Just basic maintenance and a whole lot of respect from its owner. When it was finally retired, the truck was donated to an agricultural museum as a symbol of extreme durability. With a legacy like that, it's easy to see why the C1300 tops this list. A true legend of snowbound off-roading, built to outlast even winter itself. And there you have it, a journey through some of the toughest vintage off-road trucks ever made for snow. Machines that didn't just survive time, ice, and the harshest environments, but built a legacy of trust, strength, and resilience. These aren't just vehicles. They're legends that made it possible to live, work, and even have fun in places most people wouldn't dare to step foot. They carved trails through blizzards, crossed frozen terrain, towed sleds, saved lives, and wrote their history one snowy mile at a time. Now tell me in the comments, which one of these trucks would you want in your garage? Which one impressed you the most? And which one would you take on a deep winter expedition way off the map? And of course, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Because every week, we bring you a new video featuring the most incredible machines built to conquer ice, snow, and extreme conditions. See you in the next video.